Thank you. Well, look, we could have invited about anybody to come out tonight. You know who she is. We love her at AFP, Michelle Malkin!
Because I heard that Charlotte is listing to the left with all of these folks coming to town, and I thought I'd help write that with all of you. I'm so glad to be joining you here. It's so terrific. It's a great time to be a conservative, isn't it? Have all of you been paying attention to what happened today? Happy Empty Chair Day, everyone! Now you listen to us. I love it. This is another moment in which limited government, constitutional bound conservative activists have seized the narrative, and we are crushing the information monopoly. This is a triumph, and it is such a joyous moment. I think that's the best thing about this Empty Chair Day phenomenon, isn't it? Because we're having fun. My favorite one that I posted on my website at michellemalkin.com, somebody photoshopped a chair onto Mount Rushmore. So much creativity, crowdsourcing of this incredibly humorous and funny way at poking at something that, of course, is very serious. And I think that's the wonderful thing about being happy warriors in the mold of Reagan, is that we can have smiles on our faces as we fight these very serious battles to restore our country. And I think over the last week, it's been proven that when we speak up and when we stand our political ground, whether it's putting an empty chair on our lawns and letting our neighbors see it, or whether it's standing on a podium or going to work and trying to persuade the blind, deaf, and dumb that we are headed in the wrong direction, that we can do it with the optimism and with the real hope that inspired our founding fathers. Now, as I reported recently in a column that I did last week, apparently it's racist to invoke the founding fathers. It's racist to talk about the Constitution. It's racist to even say the word Obamacare. Did you hear this? The convoluted rationale that some of these whitewashers and lapdoggies come up with to turn everything that comes out of our mouths into racism has really reached beyond absurd levels. Achoo! Racist! Racist! Now, I didn't get to explain on the Hannity show the other night another of the terms that's been deemed racist by my esteemed Real Reporter colleague, Juan Williams. He's a real reporter and I'm just a blogger. Right? So, apparently, he has these super telepathic powers and has divined in each of our minds that when we say the word Constitution, or that when somebody uses the word professor to talk about Obama, that's racist too. Of course, it's actually incorrect to call the President of the United States a professor because he was a mere lecturer. lecturer, not a professor. And that's racist too. I think that we obviously have come to a huge fork in the road between a path that leads us to prosperity, and isn't that why we're here? And isn't that why we inherited the bountiful blessings from our forefathers? Because we all believe in prosperity no matter what our color is, or our creed, or our social status. Prosperity to the right. And then that windy long road that leads right off of the cliff that those people on the left in the Democratic Party have said explicitly they want to drive us off. They want to drive us off the fiscal cliff. Well, thank you for your candor. Now let's remember, in November, there are two paths, and I've talked about this many times, between American makers and American takers. Between the preservationists of the American dream and the people who want to destroy it. And the most effective thing that we can do is raise our voices and talk about our own stories. And I think that was done very effectively over the past week. But what did those lapdoggies in the media want to do? Shush us and hush us. And I have never been one to hold my tongue. Or pull my punches. I know, I come in a small package, but you know what they say about small packages, right, short ladies? Speaking of the ladies, I'd like to salute each and every one of you here, because you are the anti-Julias. You are the antithesis of the dependent, shrinking, wallflower culture of entitlement poster girls that they want to turn us all into. I look at my 12-year-old daughter, and all I have to do is show her some of those Occupy and Code Pinko protests and the costumes that they've dressed themselves in. I know there are children in the audience, so I'm not going to spell it out. But I have to say that I'm glad it did rain a little bit to wash away some of that stench. I just landed here in Charlotte from my adopted home state of Colorado, so I haven't been able to be updated yet. Has the sand Obama been washed away yet? Well, maybe not literally, but figuratively in November, there's going to be a tide that washes that sand all away. Am I right? And we need each and every one of you to stand up and to stand your ground. And I know it is not always easy. The demonization, the ostracization, the mere almost criminalization of conservative dissent in this country has been chilling, absolutely chilling. And it's groups like Americans for Prosperity, and yes, the Koch family, that we have to be extremely grateful to for standing up for what is right and taking those slings and arrows. You know, I've been in this business for about 20 years. I've been called every name in the book. I've had all the slime thrown at me. I know I'm an Aunt Thomasina. I need to look in the mirror. I'm the white man's puppet. My husband wishes I were a white man's puppet. And I think that in particular, of course, the rise of social media, your individual ability to become a citizen journalist merely by holding up your camera, tweeting, Facebooking, and breaching this huge stonewall and this obstruction by the people who believe that they've been entitled for 2-3 decades, as long as I've been an adult in my lifetime. They have felt entitled to control those narratives. And as our dear fellow warrior Andrew Breitbart taught all of us in his lifetime, narratives are everything. Our narrative, our inherited narrative, is a narrative of success, a narrative of hope. Their narrative is a narrative of failure, abject failure, and resentment. These are the people who are so bitter and clingy to their failed Keynesian economics, to their failed porculi, to their failed schemes of redistribution of wealth. I wrote a book a couple years ago called Culture of Corruption. And it's taken this long for the many blind, deaf, and dumb, and the willfully, deliberately blind, deaf, and dumb in the lapdog media to finally acknowledge that, yes, we had a problem when you had this creature that was marinated in the swamp of Chicago. Transplant, by the way, Chicago is a racist word too, did you hear that? Transplant himself to the pre-existing Beltway swamp and turn it into Chicago on the Potomac. We are now hearing, after all these years, I saw that the New York Times, the fish wrap of record, has finally gotten around to acknowledging that Valerie Jarrett was the woman who's pulling all the strings. That this woman is not merely someone who came out of the culture of the Chicago way, but she also happens to be an unrepentant, radical leftist. And those two things make a very toxic recipe for failure in this country. And those are the two things, I think, when you're telling your stories that we need to hit hardest. And when people talk about unicorns and rainbows and magical new culture in Washington, then not only is it the same old, it smells worse than it ever has before. And these people need to be cleaned out and washed out with a towel. Of course, one of the most valuable lessons that we learned over the last several years that the Tea Party came into existence, and we had all of this grassroots counterinsurgency that came from the bottom up as opposed to all of these Soros command and controlled operatives. I call them the Soros monkeys. Those monkeys from Wizard of Oz. I know, it's racist. That the grassroots movement to restore fiscal responsibility in Washington holds both parties accountable. Sad but true, it is an inconvenient truth that big government Republicans pre-socialized this economy for Barack Obama and handed it to him on a silver platter, and they bear responsibility for it. And this is one of the hidden secrets, one of the unpleasant elephants, pun intended, in the room. That the establishment Republicans are every bit as trembling at the thought of a grassroots movement that cannot be controlled. They're as every bit as fearful of it and resentful of it as the left and the Democrats are. And they better damn be worried. Pardon my French. Every voice counts. Every body counts on the ground. And it's the nuts and bolts of participating in the political process that are going to make the difference here in North Carolina and every other state and the extra 57-ish states. promised that it's going to put its foot soldiers on the ground in a way that we haven't seen since the last election. We need to be there and match them man for man. Of course, these are the people that are bringing a gun to a fight and then accuse us of inflammatory rhetoric, right? We've seen what they can do. They have a legacy. They're the ones with the legacy of bloody violence in this country and divisiveness. And yet they tar us as the hateful ones. They accuse us of being the ones who are inciting violence and division in this country. And we have to say, no, you're wrong, you're not going to lie about us, and we're going to defeat you peacefully at the ballot box, which is the ultimate sanitizer. I'm so grateful, not just to be here, but to be an American. And I know the likes of all these Hollywood celebrities are going to roll their eyes. They hate to hear about patriotism. Well, you're going to have to deal with it, because there are a rising number, particularly of first and second generation Americans, who are not letting Andrea Mitchell speak for them. And we saw so many of those beautiful faces and beautiful stories. I'm not usually a baller, but I have to say, I had fairly moist eyes over the last week seeing so many people representing and talking about their stories as people who understand the difference between American citizenship as a privilege versus a right. I think one of the most important things we can do, and I know there are a lot of children and families here, is make sure that they understand that it wasn't Barack Obama who built the American dream. That was us. That was me. That was you and you and you. We built it. And of course, ultimately, it was those racist founding fathers that we have to pay ultimate tribute to. And the ways in which Washington has become completely untethered to the Constitution and the founding principles and documents is something that has to change. We don't have to reform it, as Paul Ryan says, we need to restore it. I'll never forget during the Obamacare debacle when Nancy Pelosi where's DHS? I'm going to arrest that. When Nancy Pelosi was asked a very simple question, is this constitutional? And do you remember her response? I'll never forget it. Well, she didn't move her face that much. She said, "That's a silly question, you silly ninny woman. That's a silly question." That's right, because nobody asks that in Washington anymore. Is this constitutional? As I said, it's both parties that need to be reminded about the true scope of government in our lives. And I have to say that I get a little reverse tingle in my leg. Not a good one. When I hear some of these Republicans in the Beltway swamp, inevitably the most barnacle-y of the Beltway barnacles, talking about capitulating on Obamacare, and you need to raise your voices and tell them, hell no you aren't. I would like to hear both parties, but I'd particularly like to hear the Republican Party talk about limiting the federal role in education. I don't want to hear about another No Child Left Behind. Democrats who are going to craft common standards for our students. No, that's a local responsibility. It's a parental and school district's responsibility. It's none of your business, but out. Same thing with every aspect of public policy, and particularly those of you who are small business owners. Let's see you raise a hand. Yes, you built it, and you don't need either Democrats or Republicans telling you that they're the ones that have 10-year, 5-year, 100-point plans to create jobs. No, we create jobs, not Washington, not our state capital, but out. I'm going to close in a second with a special surprise. Some of you may know that I do have a little bit of musical talent. I can't sing, so I'm going to need some help from some of my generation that are out there. But before I do that, I just want to thank you and urge you to keep holding the flame. Sometimes you feel like people aren't listening, that your voice isn't being heard, that it's not worth it, that it's easier to stand back and sit on the sidelines. But it's one of those moments where if not now, when, and if not you, who? Many of you who followed, my life has been an open book, not Barack Obama's. You know how he says that, my life is an open book? No, it's a cartoon book or total fiction for sure, our story. I was not always as mouthy as I am now, believe it or not. I was actually quite shy when I was in grade school. I failed speech classes because I was so petrified to get in front of audiences and see all of these eyes looking at me. But when I went to a crazy liberal college, and I know that's redundant, I had all of these condescending progressives of power, is what I call them, because of the pastiest liberals who claim to know what I should think because of my skin color and because of my chromosomal makeup. And I couldn't just stand back or put my head down in a classroom or watch other brave conservatives who were getting out there. I couldn't just watch them and not say something and speak up. Once you do it the first time, it's like a muscle. You exercise it, it gets stronger. And I know that a lot of you have been active in politics a long time, but I think that's what's wonderful over the last several years is that groups like AFP have attracted people who had never been involved in it before, who finally put their foot down after the Porculus debacle and after the Obamacare debacle and said, you know what? I've got a lot of things I do in my daily life. I've got family, I've got church, I've got my business to run, I've got my kids to raise, but I can make the time. Even if it's just a weekend, even if it's just a month, even if it's just sitting in your house and dialing or making phone calls. Sometimes it's just something as simple as sharing links on Facebook pages. I've had people tell me, you know what? I posted one of your columns on my Facebook page and you wouldn't believe the animosity I got for it, but even more unbelievable was the number of people who came up to me or messaged me or commented to me on my Facebook page and said, I think you're right too. I believe the same things you do. I never knew it. And this is how the networking happens. This is how the community organizing, the Barack Obama prize himself on so much happens. There's a fraternity, a sorority. We're a family. And I think that's what binds us all. I don't look like you. My parents came from half a world away. All our stories are different in a sense in the particulars, but we all share a common love of liberty, economic and personal liberty. We believe the founding fathers. We believe what they risked their lives for. And we don't have to do that. I mean, some of us may risk our lives. I certainly do every time I have to go on a liberal college campus. But for the most part, like I said, it's the simple things and the mass collection of everything that we're doing, the mass amplification of our stories that will make all the difference in the world. So, okay. This is a huge surprise. Even Tim doesn't know what I'm doing. I play the ukulele. I need somebody to hold this. You're going to do it, really? Okay. This is the Constitution song. And I'm going to sing it because it's racist. It's from Schoolhouse Rock. You ready? I need help if anyone knows it, okay? In 1787, I'm told our founding fathers did agree to write a list of principles for keeping people free. The USA was just our our whole brand new country. So the people spelled it out. They wanted a land of liberty. We the people, come on, you don't know it, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it from Michelle Malkin! Okay, guys, hold on a minute. If you can give Michelle just a minute to go outside, she's going to stay around for a few minutes in front of the bus to take some photos. Okay, but give me just another minute or two. Craig Woolard and the band are going to come back for a few minutes as we...